Every system you were taught about food is broken. The farms are failing, the shelves are getting emptier, the prices are climbing every single week, and the people who warned us, they were ignored. But here is the catch. There is a group of people who never worried about any of this. Not once, not in 100 years. The Amish. While modern agriculture collapses under its own weight, Amish families across America eat well, waste nothing, and depend on absolutely no one. They preserved their knowledge for 300 years. Now it is yours. 100 traditional recipes, 45 food preservation methods. Everything the Amish know about feeding a family, no matter what happens outside your door. The Amish Kitchen Secrets Complete Bundle is available right now for just $34. Instant download, 30-day money-back guarantee, zero risk. The link is in the description. Get it, come back. Because what you are about to learn will change the way you see your backyard, your balcony, your windowsill, forever. In 1943, the United States government made a desperate announcement. Grow your own food, now. Not as a hobby, not as a lifestyle trend, as a survival instruction. Victory gardens, they called them. 20 million of them. Planted on rooftops, in city parks, in backyards barely bigger than a dining table. By the end of World War II, those 20 million gardens were producing 40% of all the vegetables consumed in America. 40%. Think about what that number means. Ordinary people, office workers, teachers, grandmothers, were feeding the nation. Not industrial farms, not corporate supply chains. Kitchen gardeners with seed packets and second-hand tools. Then the war ended, and we forgot everything. But here is what they will not tell you. The knowledge that built those victory gardens never actually disappeared. We traded the knowledge of our grandparents for the convenience of a grocery store. We stopped growing. We stopped preserving. We stopped knowing how any of it worked. And now that system is cracking. Drought, supply chain disruptions, inflation that never seems to stop climbing. A bag of salad greens that cost $3 now costs $5. Tomatoes in winter, $6 a pound. Produce that traveled 1,500 miles before it touched your cart. Picked days ago, already dying. This is not a temporary problem. This is the permanent reality of a food system built on fragility. But here is what they will not tell you. The knowledge that built those victory gardens never actually disappeared. It was preserved, quietly, by farmers, homesteaders, and backyard growers who refused to forget. By communities like the Amish, who looked at the modern world and made a deliberate choice. No, not for us. And it was kept alive in the tricks, the techniques, and the deep soil wisdom that professional agriculture abandoned in the 1940s in favor of chemicals, machines, and scale. This video is about one of those tricks. One specific method, developed and refined by serious food growers in the 1940s, that turns almost any space, a small backyard, a patio, a collection of containers on a balcony, into a continuous, high-yield food production system. It does not require expensive equipment. It does not require years of experience. It does not require an acre of land. What it requires is the right knowledge, applied in the right order. And that is exactly what you are about to get. Let us start at the beginning. Day 0, you are standing in front of your space, whatever that space is, and you are feeling the two things that stop almost everyone before they ever plant a single seed. Fear, and the certainty that you do not have enough room. Let us destroy that certainty first, because it is a lie. A single 4-foot by 8-foot raised bed, managed with the right technique, will produce more vegetables per square foot than most conventional farms produce per acre. That is not an exaggeration. That is data. The research goes back decades. Intensive, properly managed small plot gardening consistently outperforms large-scale conventional agriculture on a yield per square foot basis. But here is the catch. The technique matters. Not the seed, not the soil amendment, not the tool. The technique. And the technique that changed everything. The one that serious food growers quietly refined through the 1940s while the rest of the world was looking the other way. You are a plant breeder, whether you realize it or not. Every season you save seeds, your varieties become more adapted to your specific microclimate, your specific soil, your specific conditions. After 3 or 4 seasons, the tomatoes in your garden are becoming your tomatoes. This is the foundational insight of the 1940 trick, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The soil is not a flat surface for growing things. It is a 3-dimensional system. Above the soil you have vertical space, trellises, strings, stakes, fences. Every inch of vertical space is potential growing area that most gardeners leave completely unused. Below the soil you have depth, root crops, bulbs, tubers. a second whole garden happening entirely underground. On the soil surface, you have the horizontal layer most people think of as the entire garden. The 1940 trick layers all three simultaneously. The integration. The 1940 growers did not just stagger plantings in time, they staggered them in space, simultaneously, in the same bed. Picture your raised bed. Against the back edge, you install a trellis. Up that trellis go your pole beans or your cucumbers. 3 crops, 1 footprint. This is called intensive polyculture, and professional agriculture abandoned it almost entirely after World War II because machines cannot harvest it efficiently. Machines need rows, machines need uniformity, machines need monocultures. Your hands do not, and your hands are what will feed your family. Before anything goes in the ground, you need to understand soil, not as dirt, as a living system. Healthy soil is not a medium for plants. It is a community of billions of organisms, bacteria, fungi, nematodes, earthworms, that have evolved over millions of years to do one specific thing: feed plants. When you understand this, everything changes. You stop fertilizing plants. You start feeding soil. You stop fighting against nature. You start working with a system that was already designed to do exactly what you need. The 1940 trick begins with soil preparation that most modern gardeners never do, because modern gardening culture has convinced everyone that synthetic fertilizer is a shortcut to the same result. It is not. Synthetic fertilizer feeds the plant. It does not feed the soil. Every season of synthetic fertilizer feeding leaves your soil biology slightly more depleted, your dependence on external inputs slightly more absolute. The 1940 method goes the opposite direction. You build the soil once, deeply, correctly, and then you let it work for you for years. Here is how it is done. The process begins with what serious growers call deep preparation. You are not just loosening the top few inches of soil. You are creating a root zone that goes down 12 to 14 inches, deeper than almost any home garden is ever prepared. Take your fork or your spade and work the soil in sections, not turning it over completely. That destroys the fungal networks that took years to build. Instead, lift and loosen. Break compaction without inverting layers. Then you feed, not with synthetic fertilizer, with organic matter, compost, aged manure, worm castings, whatever you have access to. 4 to 6 inches worked into the loosened zone. This is not a nutrient supplement. This is the foundation of a living ecosystem that will produce food for your family for years. The worm test tells you everything. Dig a hole 12 inches deep and 12 inches wide. Count the earthworms. Fewer than 5 means poor soil that needs work. 10 or more means you are building something healthy. 20 or more is exceptional. Chase the 20. Every earthworm in your soil is doing the work of a machine, aerating, digesting, releasing nutrients in exactly the form your plants need. A garden full of earthworms is a garden that practically runs itself. But here is the piece most people miss. Once you build soil this way, you never till it again. This is the no-dig principle, and it is one of the most powerful ideas in the entire history of food growing. Every time you disturb healthy soil, you destroy a portion of the fungal networks, the mycelium highways that connect plant root systems, share water and nutrients, and warn neighboring plants of pest attacks. These networks took months to build. A single pass with a tiller can destroy them in minutes. The 1940 growers figured this out empirically. They noticed that beds left undisturbed became more productive every season. That disturbed beds seemed to reset. That the best yields came not from the most dramatically prepared beds, but from the oldest, quietest, least disturbed ones. They were right. Modern soil science has since confirmed everything they observed. So prepare once, prepare deep, feed generously, then stop touching it. Your job from that point forward is to feed the surface, a 2 to 3 inch layer of compost each season, laid on top like a blanket, letting the worms and the fungi carry it down. The soil does the rest. Now comes the seed. And this is where the 1940 trick gets specifically radical, because the seeds matter more than almost anything else in this system. Not because some seeds are magical, because some seeds remember. Here is what modern agriculture did to our seed supply, and why it is one of the most consequential changes in the history of food. After World War II, as the agrochemical industry began its takeover of farming, seed companies began developing what are called hybrid varieties. Seeds bred specifically to produce one very high-yielding generation and then fail. Hybrid seeds, labeled F1 on packets, produce plants optimized for uniformity, machine harvesting, and long-distance shipping. They produce food that looks good on a truck, but they do not produce seeds that grow true. Plant a hybrid tomato, save its seeds, plant those seeds next year, and you will get something unpredictable, something weaker, something that has lost the characteristics that made the parent plant valuable. This was not an accident. What they will not tell you is that the seed industry understood exactly what they were creating, a system in which farmers and gardeners could never be fully independent, a system that required purchasing new seeds every single year. The 1940 trick uses a different kind of seed entirely. Open-pollinated heirloom varieties, the seeds that were grown before the hybrid era, the seeds that were selected and saved and improved over generations, the seeds that carry the genetic memory of hundreds of years of cultivation. These seeds grow true. Save them from your best plants, dry them correctly, store them properly, and you have a seed supply that will feed your family not just this year, but every year for the rest of your life. This is not a small thing. This is food independence at its most fundamental level. The closing of the loop. The moment when your garden stops being a hobby and becomes a system. The varieties to seek are not mysterious or hard to find. Tomatoes. Look for Brandywine, Cherokee Purple, San Marzano, or any variety clearly labeled as heirloom or open-pollinated. These are genuinely more flavorful, more nutritious, and more adapted to variable conditions than anything bred for industrial production. Beans. Kentucky Wonder, Dragon Tongue, Provider. Self-pollinating, easy to save, 3 to 5 years of viable storage. Lettuce. Any loose-leaf heirloom. Black-seeded Simpson, Rouge d'Hiver, Forellenschluss. Direct seed every 2 weeks throughout the season, and you will never run out of salad greens. Squash, Delicata, Butternut, Acorn, the storage varieties that kept families fed through winter before refrigeration existed. Garlic, plant in fall, harvest in summer, replant your best cloves every year. A permanent crop that asks almost nothing. Here is the critical rule of seed saving. Always save from the best, not the biggest, not the most beautiful, the most vigorous, the most productive, the most disease-resistant. You are not just saving seeds, you are selecting for the next generation. You are a plant breeder, whether you realize it or not. Every season you save seeds, your varieties become more adapted to your specific microclimate, your specific soil, your specific conditions. After 3 or 4 seasons, the tomatoes in your garden are becoming your tomatoes. Here is the problem it solves. Every home gardener has experienced the feast and famine cycle. Everything comes in at once. August is a tsunami of tomatoes and zucchini. September is empty. The garden produces an overwhelming surplus for 3 weeks and then nothing. Here is the problem it solves. Every home gardener has experienced the feast and famine cycle. Everything comes in at once. August is a tsunami of tomatoes and zucchini. September is empty. The garden produces an overwhelming surplus for 3 weeks and then nothing. The 1940 trick breaks this cycle completely. It does it with 2 interlocking techniques used simultaneously. The first is succession planting. Instead of planting all your lettuce on the same day, you plant a small amount, 1 row, 1 container, every 2 weeks. By the time that first planting is finishing and going bitter, the second planting is at peak harvest. By the time the second is done, the third is ready. Continuous, uninterrupted, season-long. The same principle applies to radishes every 2 weeks, cilantro every 3. By the time that first planting is finishing and going bitter, the second planting is at peak harvest. By the time the second is done, the third is ready. Continuous, uninterrupted, season-long. The same principle applies to radishes every 2 weeks, cilantro every 3. Bush beans every 3 weeks from last frost until 8 weeks before first frost. Spinach in spring, then again in late summer for a fall harvest. Here is a specific table to internalize. Lettuce and salad greens, every 2 weeks, 6 to 8 plantings per season. This is the weekly habit that makes all of it work. Every Sunday, 10 minutes. Check your succession schedule. If the calendar says it is time to plant the next batch of lettuce, plant it now. Do not wait. Do not plan to get to it. Do it in 10 minutes while the coffee is still hot. That single habit, 10 minutes every Sunday, will produce more continuous food than anything else you can do. But here is the second half of the 1940 trick, and this is where it becomes something different. The integration. The 1940 growers did not just stagger plantings in time. They staggered them in space, simultaneously, in the same bed. Picture your raised bed. Against the back edge, you install a trellis. Up that trellis go your pole beans or your cucumbers, vertical growers that take no horizontal space but produce enormous quantities. At the base, your heavy feeders, tomatoes, peppers. Between and around them, in every gap, you direct seed your fast crops, radishes, lettuce, spinach. Fast crops harvested before heavy feeders need that space. While all of this is happening, below the surface, in the spaces between the root systems, you have your root crops growing silently. Beets, turnips, carrots, a completely separate garden in the same footprint. 3 layers, 3 separate harvests, 1 bed, and companion planting. The 1940 growers observed that certain plants grown together do better than alone. The most important combination is the 3 sisters: corn, beans, and squash. The corn provides a trellis. The beans fix nitrogen. The squash shades the soil, suppressing weeds. 3 plants, 1 system, feeding each other. The tomato version of this is equally powerful. Plant your tomatoes with basil, which repels aphids and, according to generations of growers, genuinely improves the flavor of the tomatoes themselves. Add marigolds on the border, French marigolds specifically, which produce a root exudate that kills nematodes in the soil and repels whiteflies above it. This trio reduces the most common tomato pests by up to 60% without any chemical intervention. No spray, no cost, just the right plants together. What they will not tell you in any conventional gardening publication is that this kind of ecological intelligence, understanding the relationships between plants, soil organisms, and nutrient cycles, is what made pre-industrial food growing so remarkably productive. It was not brute force, it was observation, relationship, partnership with systems that already knew what they were doing. The 1940 trick is simply the rediscovery of that intelligence. Here is the 4-season framework that makes this a year-round system. The biggest mistake is treating the garden as a warm season hobby. Spring and summer only, then done. This is leaving 3 to 4 months of productive growing on the table. The full-year food garden operates in all 4 seasons simultaneously, with each season's planting decisions informed by what you want to be eating 3 months from now. Spring, peas, lettuce, spinach, onions, garlic from fall, early brassicas. While these are producing, you are starting warm season crops indoors, ready for transplant the moment frost passes. Summer, tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, zucchini, beans, corn, basil. Peak production. This is your peak preservation season. Every tomato you cannot eat fresh is a jar on a shelf. Every bean you cannot eat now is a frozen bag for January. Fall thrives in cool temperatures that most gardeners think of as the end. Kale, chard, arugula, broccoli, cauliflower. A fall garden started in late summer will produce fresh food deep into November and beyond. Winter, cold frames, row cover fabric. Simple structures costing $10 to $30 that extend your productive season by 6 to 8 weeks on each end. A DIY cold frame. A reclaimed window laid over a box made from 4 boards can keep spinach and kale alive and producing at outdoor temperatures as low as 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Fresh greens in January from a structure you built in an afternoon for the cost of a lunch. None of this requires significant money. Row cover fabric, $15 to $25, extends spring and fall by 3 to 4 weeks. Cold frame, DIY, $10 to $15, protects down to 20 degrees. Low tunnel, hoops, and plastic, $20 to $40. All of it requires the decision to see your growing season as something you can extend, not something that simply ends when the calendar says October. The harvest is not the end of the system. It is the beginning of the other half. Growing food is only half of food independence. Preserving it is the other half. The Amish understood this. The Victory Garden growers understood this. Every family that has ever truly fed itself through an entire year understood this. A summer garden produces abundance. What you do with it determines whether your family is food secure for the entire year. 4 preservation methods. Freezing first. No special equipment. Blanch for 2 to 3 minutes. Cool in ice water. Bag and freeze. Beans, peas, corn. They hold their nutrition for a year. Dehydrating second. Dried herbs from your garden are superior in flavor and cost nothing beyond your time. Harvest in the morning. Bundle in handfuls. Hang upside down in a warm space for 2 weeks. One basil plant yields enough for an entire year. Canning third. Water bath. Canning for high-acid foods, tomatoes, pickles, jams, is simpler than most people believe. The equipment lasts decades. A dozen quart jars of home-canned tomatoes is a dozen meals in February. Each jar reaches forward in time to feed your family. Fermentation fourth. The oldest preservation method. Sauerkraut, kimchi, lacto-fermented pickles require nothing but salt, thyme, and wild bacteria. Shelf life of months to years. Living food that feeds your gut microbiome. The goal is not to become a professional overnight. The goal is to build a pantry that creates a buffer between your family and whatever happens outside. 50 jars of tomatoes, a freezer full of beans, dried herbs, fermented vegetables. This is what the Amish have had for 300 years. Food security. It is not complicated. All of it is learnable. Starting now, here is the 12-month roadmap. January, order seeds. Prioritize heirloom varieties. Set a specific production goal. February, start onions and leeks indoors. The USDA plant hardiness zone map gives your last frost date. Find it. March, start tomatoes and peppers indoors. These need 6 to 8 weeks of growth. Do not skip this. April, direct sow peas, lettuce, and spinach. Begin hardening off seedlings, building up outdoor exposure over 10 days to avoid transplant shock. Never skip this step. May, transplant after last frost. Plant beans and cucumbers. Begin your succession schedule. June, stagger plantings. Start fall broccoli seeds. July, peak maintenance. Begin preserving cucumbers and early beans. This is the month to save your first seeds. August, peak harvest and canning. Plant fall greens. September, harvest winter squash. Plant garlic for next year. Install cold frames. October, final warm season harvests. Mulch perennial plants. November, final seed saving and tool storage. Write your season notes. What worked? December, rest, reflect, plan. And while you do all of that, your stored food is feeding your family. There is one thing that separates people. It is the decision that this matters. Your children will grow up in a world where food is less certain. The trends are clear. All of it is learnable. Starting now, here is the 12-month roadmap. January, order seeds. Prioritize heirloom varieties. Set a specific production goal. February, start onions and leeks indoors. The USDA plant hardiness zone map gives your last frost date. Find it. The Victory Garden growers of the 1940s were not special people. They were people who decided to act. They produced 40% of America's vegetables. You do not need to feed a nation. You need to feed your family. And the knowledge to do it is available to you. Right now. Today. In whatever space you have. The Amish never forgot any of this. For 300 years, they kept it alive, practicing and refining and passing down everything that the modern food system wanted you to forget. 100 recipes, 45 preservation methods, 3 centuries of practical wisdom. The Amish Kitchen Secrets Complete Bundle is in the description below. $34, instant download, 30-day money-back guarantee. Go get it. Tonight, you could be cooking your first Amish recipe from a kitchen stocked with ingredients you understand. This weekend, you could be putting up your first jars. But what happens when the harvest comes all at once? When August gives you 50 pounds of tomatoes? The next video answers that. We are going deep into food preservation. The full system. Canning, fermenting, dehydrating. The link is on screen. Subscribe so you do not miss it. Because everything you planted, you are about to learn exactly how to keep it.